Hi students, this is Dr. Thomas, and I wanted to show you how to solve for a variable. You may already know how to solve for a variable because perhaps in your previous class you had to solve for y, for example, when you were graphing. So I'm just going to go more in depth so that you have a better understanding for intermediate algebra. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get one variable on one side of the equation by itself. So what we're going to do is identify the variable for which we're solving for, and then we're going to use inverse operations to isolate that variable. For example, the formula for the volume of a pyramid is V equals 1/3 times BH, or volume equals 1/3 times the base times the height. Let's say you wanted to get the H on one side by itself. If we have a fraction, we'll try to get rid of that fraction. And right now we have 1/3 as our fraction. So I will try to get rid of that fraction. I will multiply both sides by the reciprocal of the fraction. In this case, 1/3 is the fraction. So we'll multiply both sides by the reciprocal 1/3, which is the flipped version of 1/3, 3/1, which is 3. That way, we'll get rid of the 3's. So already we're making progress here because we got rid of the fraction first. So now we have 3 times V, which is just 3V, equals BH. For H is on the right side, so only thing we need to get rid of is this B here. Now this is B times H, so the inverse of multiplication is division. So here in this step, I'm going to divide both sides by the B. That will get rid of this B because B divided by B is 1, or most people say it cancels out, but it is equivalent to 1. 1 is always understood to be there still. So what does H equal? H is on the side by itself now. It's 3V over B. Now let's go on to this equation. Y equals 3x plus 6. I'm pretty sure you're able to recognize this form, right? It looks like something that's familiar to you because it's something that you actually had to do in a previous math class. You had to solve for y. Remember, this is called the slope-intercept form. The slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So for the most part, you've been asked to solve for y. So that's exactly what we're doing today. We're solving for a variable, and you have solved for y many times. But let's say you were asked to solve for x. Not solve for y, solve for x this time. So here's what we're going to do. We identify where our variable is. It's right here on the right side. So we want to get everything else on the left side. So the first thing we're going to do, since that's a plus 6 there, let's subtract the 6 from both sides. So that's 6 minus 6 is 0. And we're going to have y minus 6. So y minus 6 equals 3x. Now since that's 3 times x, or that's multiplication, we're going to do the inverse operation of that, which is division. So we're going to divide by 3. And you have to divide everything by 3. 3 over 3, of course, is 1. Most people say cancels out. So our x equals y minus 6 over 3. Of course, you can write this another way, but this is good for now. So there are alternative ways you could write that if you wanted to split that up as y over 3 minus 6 over 3, which is y over 3 minus 2. A lot of different options there, but let's just focus right now, since we just got started, just getting that variable by itself. Okay, now we have another formula, P equals 2L plus 2W. You may actually recognize this formula as well. It is the perimeter of a rectangle formula. So this is the perimeter equals 2 times the length plus 2 times W. So really that's capital L here. Alright, so we want to solve for W. So here's our W. We want to get that by itself. So let's get started. P equals 2L plus 2W. What should we do first? Well, we want to get rid of this term first, right? Since we want 2W by itself. So what I'm going to do is, let's subtract it. So we're going to subtract 2L from both sides. 2L minus 2L cancels out. So now we have P minus 2L equals 2W. Then we're going to get rid of this 2 by dividing it, of course. 2's cancel out, which is equivalent to 1W. It's just W. So W equals P minus 2L over 2. Let's continue. Okay, here we have something very different. You may not recognize this formula at all because it's made up, right? But we're still tasked with solving for a variable. Here's an issue. Our variable is in the denominator. We must get that out of the denominator in order to solve for y, or y over 1. Notice that the y we want to solve for is in the numerator, so we must get that y out. Now, here's what I suggest we do. We treat this as a proportion, okay? We treat this as a proportion. When you have a fraction equals a fraction, recall that you can multiply, cross multiply. So remember that. So I can multiply 3 times x minus 4 and set that equals to negative 2 times y minus 5. So automatically, just from that small trick there, wow, I don't have a denominator. My y and my x are both in the numerator, all right? So in order to get y by itself, identify where y is. Y is over here, but let's distribute first to make this a little easier. So that's 3x minus 12 equals negative 2y. Not forgetting that that's a negative times a negative there, so that's going to change to a plus sign, plus 10. Now, our y is still on this side, so we're going to get everything else out of this side. So let's start with this 10. What do we need to do to get rid of that 10? All right, since that is a positive 10, let's subtract it from both sides. All right, if we subtract it from both sides, it's going to cancel out from the right side, and that's what we want. Now what we have is a 3x, and we're going to combine like terms here. Negative 12 minus 10. What is negative 12 minus 10? It is negative 22. So we add. Same sign, add and keep, different signs subtract. And then we have negative 2y on this side. So the only thing we have to do now is get rid of that negative 2. So in order to do that, let's divide by negative 2. The negative 2 divided by negative 2 goes away. So now we have y equals, and it's conventional to move that negative up on the side of that line there. You'll get negative. Then if it's right next to that line, it doesn't affect the signs in the numerator here. However, if you decide to write it another way, here are your other options, okay? So this is option 1. Alright, is negative right next to that line. Okay, 3x minus 22 over 2. Or you could write, if you move that negative completely in the numerator, it does affect all of the signs after. Alright, so that's 3x, and it will change that negative 22 to a positive 22, because it's like saying negative, put a parenthesis. It's best to put a parenthesis there, right? And distribute like so over 2. So that's your option 2. Another option would be, if you wanted to split this up, y equals negative 3x over 2 plus 22 over 2, which is 11. So 3 different ways you could write the answer for this one. And look, we put it in slow intercept form, as you can see. If your teacher were to ask you what is the slope, you say negative 3/2. What is the y-intercept? Would be 0, 11. So this is the slope intercept form. Let's move on. Alright, here's another formula, q equals c plus d over 2. And we're asked to solve for d. Again, we have a fraction, so we always want to get rid of that fraction, that rational first. In order to get rid of that 2, since that's division, let's go ahead and multiply both sides by 2. That'll get rid of that 2. So we're going to multiply that by 2. If you multiply this by 2, what you have is 2q equals, the 2's will cancel out on this side, c plus d. We're solving for d, so the only thing we need to do now is get rid of this c by doing what? Just subtracting it. Now get rid of the c's on that side, and what you have is 2q minus c equals d. Done. Alright, lastly, I wanted to tackle a very interesting problem. This problem is x equals y plus 2 over y, and we're asked to solve for y. Do you see anything interesting about this one? Well, notice we have a y in the numerator and a y in the denominator. Right? That's very, very interesting problem that I definitely wanted to address. So we're not going to change strategies here for the first step. We're still going to try to get rid of this fraction by doing what? Let's just go ahead and multiply both sides by y, right? To get rid of that fraction. Alright, if we do that, notice that our y's will cancel out from the right side. That's what we want. X times y is just xy equals y plus 2. Very interesting because we have y's in 2 different places. Always get your variables together. Alright? Alright? The one that you're trying to focus on getting together, right? Or solving for. So, for example, I want the y to be on the same side with that y because let's just say they're siblings. They want to be together. Alright? So, here we go. Subtract that y. I want to go on this team over here because that's my brother's on that team. So I want to stick with him. So that will remove the y's from that side. And now I have xy minus y on this side equals 2. Alright, they're together. Alright, so now something that you're very familiar with in this class. Alright, we don't want 2 y's, we just want to make it 1 y. So we're going to factor out a y. X minus 1 equals 2. Y times x is xy, and y times 1 is y. All we have to do now to get y by itself is divide by x minus 1. That cancels. So now we have our answer, which is y equals 2 over x minus 1. Alright, this concludes the video for solving for a variable. I hope it makes sense to you and you got a better understanding of how to get a variable on one side by itself.